Well, hi everyone. I'm LAURIE PUMPHREY. I'm with the Division of Code Enforcement within the City of Tucson. I've been with the city for over 22 years, with code enforcement for about 17. Robert Gonzalez, he can go ahead and introduce himself.
Robert Gonzalez with the City of Tucson Code Enforcement. Been with the city since 2007, so I kind of moved up the different rankings and started different departments such as water, did the water citation officer for Tucson Water. Now I'm at code enforcement here. So I got a lot of different background, different areas. So hopefully we can assist with answering all your guys' questions. Maybe you have some concerns. I got a notepad, pen, ready to go to get this going and see if we can help answer all your guys' questions. I understand you guys have a lot regarding minimum housing complaints and just the process of everything. If you guys like, fire away and see if we can maximize your time with us.
Yeah. But first, I want to, before we get into the specific area that we're talking about, which is, we call it minimum housing. It's in Tucson Code Chapter 16, specifically Section 1611. But I want everyone to know code enforcement not only does this, but we do a wide variety of code enforcement. We do property maintenance, like accumulation of vegetation. We do sign violations, work without permits. We assist Tucson Police with homeless camps and cleanups, vacant houses. There's a lot that we do. It's quite a wide spectrum, and we've been doing it for a long time. And so what we're talking about today is one portion of that. So to understand more fully what we do, we call it minimum housing. And so what a tenant needs to do is contact our office. I have some cards here with our main line, 791-5843, or there's a web form. And so what we're going to need from you is what are the areas of concern in your unit. So things we can look at, we look at fire safety, heating and cooling, anything like electrical violations or hazards. Maybe the outlet's loose, maybe there's trip hazards in the home, you have a leak, the lights are loose, there's missing globes. There could be a wide variety of things. I've also printed off, and I'll pass these out too, is that section of code that really goes into it. I'll keep this in. We do surfaces, holes in the wall, anything that's deteriorating. So what we're going to need from you is when you call in a complaint, so you call it in or submit it on our online form, is we are going to need your name and number and the ability of you to provide access to our inspector to get inside to check these things and specifically what your concerns are. We also need the manager's name and number because ultimately if we find violations, we're going to have to contact them for resolution. And so what happens if we do find violations, the inspector will write up a notice of violation. And depending on what the violation is, the time frame for abatement, will vary. If it's absolutely urgent, it'll be much quicker. A typical notice could be 30 days. And so we'll have to come in, schedule reinspection with you to see if they were complied with. Ultimately, if the owner doesn't take care of the violations, we can write a citation and take them to city court for a civil infraction and trying to get abatement that way. So that's basically it. Once Robert gets back, he can go into more detail, but I can take a couple questions right now.
One important thing was when I called code enforcement, that they actually called the property manager to give them a chance to address the issue. And that was helpful in making that property manager move.
Exactly. So that's part of the process. We have to work with both you, the tenant, and the property management to get it done. And a lot of times, just simply contacting them, meeting them at the property will help get that done. If it's a very specific complaint, like say the air conditioner's not working, a lot of times we'll call up management and they'll be like, well, we are we know about it, and we'll get that done within the next day. And we follow up with that. But, you know, a lot of these complaints that we get and concerns that we can look at, we do need to get inside. So then we can kind of do an inventory of what's wrong and then write that up as a notice. Do you have anything to add to that?
Now, you said there was a follow-up that after, so when you called about my air condition and it was resolved that there was some communication from him to saying that he addressed the issue?
It's possible a property manager could say it's been abated, fixed, but we'll need to hear from you and visit with you as a tenant to confirm that.
That's real helpful if they got to be accountable to you. I wish that if that's not part of the process, it should be, to make them have to say that they fixed it to you guys, to your agency. That would be helpful.
So in some circumstances, we actually get property managers, property owners to provide us invoices of all actions taken action at the property. Because some of these repairs, they're not just screwing in a light bulb. Some of it requires permits. Some of it requires an expert, such as bee extermination, roaches for rodents, roaches, any of those type of things. And we don't want just someone to go over there with some clear fluid inside a tank and spray around your unit, hoping that it is a treatment and not just water. So we get actually emails, we get text messages, we get, they'll call us and let us know, hey, Robert, such and such company came by, they gave us an invoice. If you want me to text it to you, fax it, or email, most of the time, everybody texts things. It's a lot more convenient. Everybody, or just snap a picture of it and they send it to us. So that line of communication is always welcome, because ultimately, code enforcement is not here to put a thumb down on someone and say, hey, you're the bad person, you're not doing anything. We need to get the problem fixed. That's all it is. We need compliance. Someone has an issue, we need to find a solution to get it fixed. We're not here to find people take millions of dollars out of their pockets. We're not in business for that. We're here to get the problem fixed. That's why we always keep the open communication beforehand. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering how many complaints you get and like what's your caseload like? Are you able to get to complaints pretty quickly?
No, not very quickly. So we have, right now, what's our last case was open? Like 4,200. So we have an activity number when a case is open. That activity number actually tracks how many cases have been opened up for the year. So right now, I think we're in the 4,000s, right?
Yeah, and that's about right. I think last year we did between 8,000 and 9,000 total cases, not just minimum housing, but everything that we do. Property maintenance is a large part of that. And minimum housing is, you know, like I'd say 15% of the total. But we take everything in when people report it, and then we inspect them according to date received, and whether or not they're an immediate hazard or not. You know, somebody who the air conditioning hasn't been working for a week, you know, we want to get out there, you know, after 24 hours of being notified about it. We don't want anyone there without air conditioning, you know, especially right now. And please know that, you know, we're here to help you. You know, we want to know about these things before you get to a point, you know, some people, maybe they're having a dispute with their landlord. You know, we want to help you before you get to that point. You know, if you're not getting some of these things done, you know, call us and then we can schedule a time to come out.
So that's like for the AC, but for Ms. Patel, the Arizona Revised Statute 33-1324, repairing the duct, it says that you can take up to half of your rent or up to $300, and it has to be a licensed contractor. $300 doesn't go far with a licensed contractor.
So that's under the Landlord Tenant Act provisions of the state law, and it's not really what code enforcement addresses. So those rights, you may have those rights separate under state law from actions that the city can be involved with if there's a specific code enforcement violation.
Right.
No, I was asking that as the city attorney to get more clarification on that from the attorney from the legal point of view, if the repair is more than half of the rent and is that $300 deductible, is there some remedy beyond that?
Yeah, I just want to say, it's important to know that we, as a city agency, can only enforce city code.
Okay.
We can't enforce the state code or
Mhm.
provide,
Okay,
a legal response to that.
That's
but-
understandable.
Yeah, so think of it as two separate things. The Landlord-Tenant Act is something that's available to you through the state, whenever those provisions provide, that's something that may be pursued legally. But our process is separate from that. It's strictly city code, what's required for minimum housing. And we can take that to court, and we do several times, so. Yes, sir.
So, each of these things on here, these are things that the landlord or the company would definitely have to address, like if there was a problem. It wouldn't like depend on like what your contract might stipulate.
Correct. So this is what the city requires. So say we conducted an inspection and we found one of these items under Chapter 1611.
And you just like, you don't do like routine inspections like house to house. It's like if someone reports one of these problems.
Right, yeah. It starts with you, and then we schedule it.
And you said you could like get involved with the court if there was like a issue like one of these that wasn't being fixed.
If we send a notice of violation, and we have to conduct a follow-up, and if the landlord or property owner fails to respond or take care of any issue that we find, one of our remedies is to write it. It's like a traffic ticket, basically. It's a civil infraction. So we write up the violation, and we go to city court, and we're there. They're expected to show up, and we have a hearing, and there's a judge. So yes, we do take it to court. Yes, ma'am.
I have some questions about just like understanding a timeline so that we can just help serve our community better, because we're all coming from AMPI, and we just have a lot of issues with landlords having buildings and just total disrepair and whatever. So a 10-day notice, where does that fit into you guys? Is that something that's necessary, or depending, because I know there's like a 5-day notice and a 10-day notice, is that like legally mandated that we give notice, or is that kind of a grace thing that you give a landlord, whereas you could, in theory, just call code enforcement immediately?
Yeah, well, for us, when we issue notice, it's up to us. It's a process. So we have certain violations that could even be a 30-day abatement period. There are some that could be 48 hours. Something like you're missing smoke alarms or something like that. Your AC is not working. That's going to have a shorter time frame. So it just depends on what the violation is. A lot of these are 30 days, that don't impact immediate safety, but do need to get repaired. And
I actually meant like on our end. Yeah, so like let's say people in this room have done it. Like this isn't my notice to you as my landlord that my window is broken. There's a 10-day thing, and like does that fit in at all? No. Okay.
No, we don't give a time frame. We encourage everybody to work with their landlord or management company. Reason being is we have to give them a reasonable time to fix it. If you're just at a place that you live at 123 North Main, you're making up an address, okay, and historically your AC is always breaking down, you got mice going in and out of your house, and you sent numerous of emails, text messages, and the owner just refuses to do anything, let us know. Even if we've worked with the past with the owner and he just doesn't do anything, we'll go straight to citation on certain people, especially if recidivist offenses.
Okay.
I will just add, I know that Robert handed out a list of websites. One of them is the Arizona Landlord Tenant Act. In that act, there are some provisions for providing notice to your landlord. And on some types of repairs, there are timeframes set out for a response from the landlord. So it's actually very nice. You also added the number on the website for legal aid, and they can sort of help you with your individual situation if you want to take action to provide notice directly. I think the process we're talking about is for you to report a specific violation of sort of the minimum housing requirements that the city requires to the city for the city to take code enforcement action.
Yeah,
Those are going to be two separate things, but you can do them simultaneously.
Totally, and I think it's more about like the real world application for like someone, so I'm on the board of the Neighborhood Association. Someone comes to the meeting and says, this is happening, it's like, how do I guide them? So it sounds like maybe it's like you're saying a hybrid of knowing the Landlord-Tenant Act and when to engage code enforcement, which is really what I'm hoping to take away is like when do we start engaging code enforcement versus, and I get that like we're trying to, you know, work with the landlord and ask them first, and the hard truth is a lot of them just like don't care. But so, and then I was just wondering too, like it's good to know that it's on your end that you guys follow up with whatever date that you have. And then I'm wondering also, like, if there's something out of the scope, like, like one specific example is a broken window. Is that something that code enforcement would?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's, because there are some times that, you know, we're trying to ask for something like that specifically, like it's a broken window, and the guy just says no. And so I'm wanting to know what tools we have in our toolbox to say, okay, it sounds like the next thing we do is, you know, call you guys and have you come out there.
Yeah.
But what we do urge you, if it's something life safety, like no AC, no heating, things that could potentially hurt somebody, or even the roach infestation, that's big. Believe it or not, I've gone into units where the walls are moving, not the drywall itself is moving, but the roaches. And you know, things like that need to be addressed. They need to be addressed immediately. Don't hold back trying to work with them. If they didn't work with you the first time around, just let us know immediately, because that kind of stuff needs to get addressed immediately. Because ultimately it's your guys' health and well-being. So don't hesitate on things like that. And, you know, you can always call the 791-5843 or even email us at the code enforcement website to, if you have something that you're not sure about, email it, call us. If it's something that we don't handle, it's not in our jurisdiction, meaning that we don't have a law for us to move forward, we'll let you know. That's not a problem. Hopefully we can guide you, hey, maybe this department can help you. We don't know until those questions are asked. And hopefully we can always give you guys the right answers.
Yeah, and that's what I mean too. Don't wait until you're in a dire situation. We want to help you at the beginning, if it's just some of these, smaller stuff, let's start there. And sometimes that helps before it gets to be a larger problem.
And do you guys ever, my last question is, like, does it ever get to a point where, I'm curious how the constable interfaces with code enforcement. Does that interface at all? No. Okay. I'm just trying to understand where all the bodies are.
Oh, like for evictions, that kind of thing?
Anything,
Yeah.
even just trying to get a landlord to move on doing something.
So I will say this. Say for instance, person A submits a complaint with us today, and I'm gonna just say it's a violation of 10 days, and they get evicted within 5 days. We legally have no more right to go inside that unit. We lose that right of entry. But without a permission, we can't go into private property, whether that's being the landlord, the landlord, or the occupant, whoever is in control of that living unit. Okay. Once that right of entry is gone, I can't tell landlord B, let me in your house. I need to make sure that you did fix what we told you to fix. That's
Yeah.
out.
Yeah,
That's out for us.
And then we call that the jurisdiction of enforcement. It's, we don't have a legal right to enter like that, and that's why it's important to set that up with you. As a tenant reporting it, you also have to allow entry into the unit, and also for a follow-up to be able to be effective that way.
She had her hand up back in the corner.
I see on your list on the very back page, almost the bottom of the page, insect and rodent control. The previous one that I was in, actually both, my front rental and the last rental, it was written into the release that pest control is the responsibility of the tenant. So-
That's actually pretty common. Regardless what that lease says, we still hold property owners management responsible for treatment. Whether what they do after the fact that we get the treatment is out of our control. So if they hold you to that lease agreement later, that becomes a civil matter that the city of Tucson doesn't have the right to say different.
Right, yeah, any of these violations, we,
In my previous rental, the house was infested with mice, and property manager wouldn't do anything about it. My problem. I had to go out and get those little
Sticky traps?
sonic things that I plug into all the outlets to scare them away.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. A lot of people do fall victim under that pretense. They see it written under black and white lease agreement saying that tenants are responsible for their own treatment of their house. I have viewed that to be super unsuccessful to get the treatments conducted in the units. Reason being is sometimes people can't afford it. That's just a flat out truth. And what that happens is it creates a roach infestation in unit 1. Meanwhile, unit 2 can be the cleanest person in the world. They're going to keep having that problems because they're going to transfer through the cells, the wall cells, to the electrical, come in and out of it, bed bugs, you name it. But you do have the right to report it to us, and we do address it. But whatever happens after that, they can hold you on that lease agreement.
I just want to add, because I forgot to mention at the beginning, that Bennett Bernal is here, who is a constable here in Ward 3. And for after this, if folks have questions that are specific to, now, the constable is a county person, so like it's a different set of factors, but just if anybody has questions about it, he's here to help out with them.
If you guys have any questions, I got a legal serving order of protection right now, so if anyone has any questions about constables, I'm here for a few more minutes waiting for you. So, if anyone has questions.
You have a question, Scott?
Yeah, the specific question, you actually came out to my apartment and I had a problem with my AC unit, and we had to let it run until your associates came back. And when I moved into the apartment complex, the management was giving us the air filters. This new management took over, they stopped doing that. But we were contractually obligated to change the filters, and I talked with Southern Arizona Legal Aid, and so it's an issue that's up for debate, for lawyers to debate. Is there any guidance from code enforcement as far as that? Because it says here that the units are supposed to be, per your the second part, that they're supposed to be kept in working order, and per the third part, and part 3, section B about all mechanical equipment. And so we were obligated and we were given that stuff, and there is an obligation, but so we have no recourse except to fight in court.
yeah, if it's a provision of a lease agreement, yeah, again, that's separate, even if we're going to require it. Say you have a evaporative cooler, it's missing, you know, the filters or whatever it needs to operate to actually help cool the unit. So we are going to ask the owners to do it, but they may pursue, you know, a different set, you know, the provisions of your lease agreement, which are separate and we don't enforce, right? So we can ask for this stuff and have it done, but yeah, but it doesn't invalidate the lease agreement or whatever you may have signed.
Yeah, it's a issue for lawyers. Yeah, so another issue that's at the door that we're facing is people who have major appliances that are broken. And so does that fall into, like your refrigerator, if your meat is going to go bad that's in your refrigerator, does that qualify it as a 5 or 10 day? Because it could be looked at as health and safety. What's the line there?
Well, that actually isn't covered by this code, which is a misconception frequently. So appliances. So what the code only requires is that there's a cooking area and a sink with running water, hot and cold. So as far as providing a refrigerator, a stove, is that
We don't have an
Yeah.
ordinance to make them give you a new refrigerator or a working stove or anything like
Right.
that. It's just not something we have on law for us.
Right, because, yeah. No, go ahead.
So I have a kind of a follow-up question to this Miriam's question here earlier about the infestation, but I think it might apply to like all of these items here. I wasn't quite clear. You have the ability to respond to a specific claim, and then once that claim is finished and you do a follow-up, if the issue persists, you have no jurisdictional position? What were you expressing? So like you had said that once it's gone through, the landlord has fulfilled their obligation, then there's nothing further that you can do? Is this like once you address one issue, it can't be readdressed? Does this like, am I misunderstanding what you're communicating?
Well, I'll put it this way. So we'll do an initial inspection, and we find 10 items. And we write those up in a notice of violation. We ask the property management to fix it. They fix those items, and we conduct a follow-up inspection, and there's nothing else, and everything's good, then we're going to close the case.
Okay.
That doesn't stop you from later on calling back. Like, say it's your air conditioner, they fixed it, but 2 months later, it's out again, and they're not fixing it, you know. Then we'll come back, yeah.
And so this applies to everything under minimum housing? It's
Right.
like not just, okay.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
I have a question. You said also about specifically the pests. So even if the lease says that the landlord does not, requires the tenant to address pests, we can file a claim, you will go out, make them do it, and then you said they can then do what they need to do on the lease end. So are you saying like to charge you for the services?
They could take that action, they could consider you to be in breach of your lease if the obligation was for the tenant to do that work under the lease and they failed to do that. So whatever your arrangement is under your own lease is not something that code enforcement of the city can impact. We are going to be enforcing the minimum housing standards to make sure that the units are in compliance with the minimum standards that the city requires. But in terms of who's responsible for what or who pays for what, that may be an arrangement between the two private entities, the tenant and the landlord. That's why it's sort of important for you to know what your rights are under your lease and what your rights may be under the Arizona tenant landlord statute, because there may be other redress there that's not covered under the city code requirements.
I suggest you all read it, and, follow the link on here.
Thank you.
Sheet promoted.
I should just add this. It's something for you to be conscious of. If you report something to code enforcement and there is actually a habitation issue in the unit, we go and we observe. Our code enforcement division and our inspectors must actually act on that. So we can't really just sort of say, oh, okay, forget it. We're going to walk away because it's going to cost the tenant money or something like that. We will have to actually initiate an action to get it remedied in some way or another.
And then, sometimes it's extreme. Sometimes we have to condemn a unit. We've investigated severe cases, and sometimes it's where it's not usually where a tenant calls us in, but, if someone's lacking utilities, we will condemn a unit because you have to have utilities. So then that can get to be a little gray area there.
Thank you. You've also mentioned civil matters. Can you elaborate a little bit on what constitutes a civil matter and what can be done in that area, if anything? Or where those distinctions lie?
So, basically though, what we mean when we talk about a civil matter is going to be either a breach of the Tenant-Landlord Act itself, because it has certain requirements of what landlords are required to do and what tenants are required to do, and or a contract dispute between the tenant and the landlord. That's a civil matter between those two separate parties, and you may have legal rights that come out of those contractual rights that you have with your landlord. In which case, you may have the ability to take actual action against your landlord for certain violations. That's outside of what code enforcement would be doing, and the city really cannot get involved between the landlord and the tenant in terms of the rights within the lease and what the requirements are. So, for example, the issue about the rodent infestation, if the landlord was to say, well, it's the tenant's responsibility and they're going to charge you, it's not something that we would be involved with. We could require the landlord, who's the owner of the unit, to make it habitable and conduct and do the necessary rodent, extermination process. But who's responsible for paying for it may wind up being between the tenant and the landlord, and that would be a civil matter between those parties.
Yeah, who would report that if they were going to be on the hook for it in the first place? What would be the point?
Some people don't know that they are
That's why I'm
perhaps,
mentioning to you that
Yeah.
if it is the tenant's responsibility to do it under that contractual obligation,
Yeah, then I'm not even going to bother calling code enforcement. I would just take care of it myself, because then, I'm going to end up paying for it either way. What does it matter?
that's a legal decision that you would have to make. I'm just trying to make you aware of the fact that sometimes the result can be not exactly what the tenant is thinking.
Of course.
Right, and then another situation would be, a lot of people sometimes are in the process of being evicted, and then we get called out, and unfortunately, we can't stop that process. We can come in and conduct an inspection and get whatever we can get done, but we cannot interfere in that process as much as we would want to, but we can't. So,
He's been patiently waiting here.
oh, right here? All right.
Robert and it's Lori.
Laurie, yeah.
So it sounds like what I hear, the city attorney, it sounds like what I hear is if there's a legal complaint against the landlord, and the city has to respond to verify if it's fair or not, if it exists or not. Once the inspector is granted access, is it such that the inspector goes around looking to ensure that each room is, has one outlet and a light fixture, or is the inspector strictly looking at the complaint itself?
I think Robert can probably identify the scope of what he's going to look at, but to the extent that, he calls my office and reports something he's seen, like there's, he goes in for an air conditioner, but he happens to see large amounts of black mold inside the unit. He can't just ignore the black mold. We will have to take an action to remedy
Did you
it.
say black mold?
We actually
Black
don't,
mold.
we actually don't
We
do
don't
that.
want, well, drywall damage is
Drywall
something we
damage,
yeah.
commonly enforce. We legally don't have an ordinance against black mold, okay? So depending on the extent of drywall damage, we can run forward with that, okay? Because that's something we have to get creative with. So if
Inspector's there because there's a report of the cooling system doesn't work properly or something.
But if we do notice that, say the roof is going to collapse, it is our obligation to take immediate action to minimize that hazard, whether it is to condemn the house, cut power. Believe it or not, I've been to units where they call me out because an outlet receptacle is not working. But it turns out the wiring was completely just done wrong. We can't leave that building energized with potential that someone's going to get electrocuted, would cause a fire. We have to cut power.
Aware of it.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, once you become aware.
Right.
Exactly, yes, yes. So we have to take action right then and there. And sometimes that's not into the occupant's benefit because they're getting kicked out of their house that they were staying at where they just had a simple outlet fault.
So is it your, so what I'm hearing is that when you're on site, you was talking about 8,000 to 9,000 case complaints last year in 2021. So once you're on site, you're looking at, if there's something evident when you're going, but you're looking at whatever the tenant complained about, but you're not going room to room to room to room looking for.
Sometimes the furniture itself doesn't permit that. Reason being is because everybody has their own decoration, they have their furniture there. I'm not gonna be able to move some of these big armoires by myself just to plug in a unit to see if it was wired correctly. So if we're being called out there for a lack of AC or road, whatever it is, if we can see it, we'll address it. But it's not something that we're gonna look through every nook and cranny. Exactly.
Well, we're gonna look the perimeter, and we're gonna hit everything, and then some things are gonna be very obvious, you know. And usually the tenant already knows what the concerns are, you know. Sir?
I have a question. Is there a situation to where a landlord can retaliate because they called you?
I'm gonna give you guys a real answer, okay? This is what I face every single day. And it's not gonna be any legal advice or anything, it just happens. Especially the people who are months and months. They call in a complaint because whatever reason, AC is not working. Guess what? The landlord fixes it, and he can choose not to renew your 30-day lease agreement for whatever reason. Doesn't have to say that it was because you called code enforcement. It does happen more often than not. And that's just something that's unavoidable. And that could be looked at as a form of retaliation, but to prove it,
So that's, I mean, it would come down to just the legalities of being able to prove that, I mean, if there was no other complaints or issues other than what court enforcement enforced, I mean, it should be provable in a court of law. I mean, if the rent's paid.
Right, and that's where you might contact Southern Arizona Legal Aid and the provisions of the Landlord-Tenant Act.
But just, if I could piggyback on this, my understanding is that under Arizona law, tenants don't have a lot of rights when it comes to, I mean, you are in someone's home, in their property by their, you know, by their whim, and that there's not a lot to stop. Please tell me if I'm mistaken, but there's not a lot. They literally could just say, I just don't feel like it, and they could not renew your lease. And so it's really stacked against tenants in terms of having a right to stay in your home if you're a tenant.
You know, I've seen other situations where I hear a tenant might be withholding their rent because the owner's not taking care of certain things, and I would just recommend that, again, you review what your rights are through the state, through the Landlord-Tenant Act. You know, don't give the landlord a reason to, you know, start legal action against you because, you know, I'm not giving legal advice here, you know, to keep paying your rent, but, you know, don't get in a situation that's going to affect you in that way, you know, because we're here to help get these resolved. So we don't want to see another issue where, you know, maybe there's something wrong with the lease agreement.
So to be clear, Lori, that depending on the severity of the complaint, then the code enforcement will go out, how quick code enforcement can go out. And then, but the tenant would be, it would not be advisable, one might say, for the tenant to say, well, you haven't fixed the broken window, I'm not going to pay rent, and then, you know, which is really kind of a separate
Yeah, that
issue.
could cause a separate issue, separate from us and what we can do, you know, that will affect your tenancy. So it's just a recommendation not to, you know, that, you know, if you have a lease, again, you know, do your research, know what your rights are.
Robert, do you find that or either one, do you find where a tenant will, by the time you get out there with your workload, that a tenant will have withheld rent because I'm not fixing this? You know, we all kind of feel.
yeah, there's a lot of people that feel empowered that because they're not getting their needs met, that they don't pay rent.
Yeah, they
They'll
feel
hold
like
back.
cheese whiz.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that creates a different legal battle for them in the future for the course of eviction because you have to pay. You have to pay for the services that, even though it's not to the standards you want, but you still have to pay to live there.
Yeah, and then that's how we can help, you know. You stay good with your lease agreement, you have issues, call us, you know, as far as these items here in Chapter 16. Yeah.
Can I be clear?
Yeah, sorry, she had her.
Yes.
It's me interrupting you. I have two questions. One is, does a tenant have to call? Like, let's say I'm in my neighborhood and this building looks like garbage, can I call us, like, just a person that doesn't live there?
That only depends on what type of violation are being called in. If you're calling in that the weeds, there's a junk motor vehicle in front, yes. But you're calling for something that's going on inside,
Okay.
for one, how are you finding this information? You're invading their privacy. We got the Fourth Amendment, okay? And for us to verify it, the tenant doesn't let us in, we can't verify it. Government can only go so far.
I'm like speaking specifically to, yeah, like exterior stuff.
Yes.
And
Yes.
also because of the frank conversation we're having that you do put a target on your back when you call code enforcement.
Absolutely, yes.
So that's one question. I also have a question of, let's say, who like writes and keeps this? Like if there's an amendment, because I'm thinking the black mold thing, it really sucks. How could we change this? Is it something we could bring forward to our city council person, that we could add an amendment?
Yes.
I love it, cool.
I believe everybody has to vote on that, is that correct, for any
Yeah.
I
ordinance?
think that there's a process.
Yeah, there's a process.
Oh, I know there's a process, but I'm saying that
Yeah.
it's
City council would have to
Yeah.
amend the code.
I understand, but I'm just asking that, like, you know, there has to be a way to amend this document to make it include some of the, because we know people that have black mold, and it's absurd that that's not covered by this.
I think across the country too, not a lot of jurisdictions do investigate it, and it's more, again, left up to the tenant to have it tested for,
Right.
and then,
And to the extent that it damages drywall.
Yeah.
well, right, yeah, the things like drywall, you might see mold on it, but what we're addressing is that fact that the drywall's damaged, and
It's falling apart, it's crumbling
Yeah,
because
so
it's so
it's-
soggy.
it's more like there's a leak, fix the leak, repair the drywall. That's what we're looking at. Yeah, I mean, this guy asked a question
Yeah, I
before,
think-
so.
So, like you were saying before, so like, the landlord has to fix everything on this list, right? But for any of these things, you could be billed for it just because of your contract might include.
Depending what's on your lease agreement, correct?
Okay, so if your contract says like you are responsible for any AC repairs, you move in, it's already broken, you're just responsible for that, or like is that?
Well, let me think, a lot of places, you know, you have to do a checklist before you move in, so it might be part of that, but again, if we go out, we're gonna hold the owner responsible to repair it, so it's,
But later it
Sorry,
can be.
Can you repeat that?
yeah, well, just, if it's broken, we're gonna ask the owner to repair it, yeah, and again, it's just, you know,
It's
what's
just based on the contract, like they
Yeah.
can totally just like bill us for whatever.
possibly.
Going back to the windows, your statute says that you're only looking for a lock on the window.
Lock or broken window pane. It might be a different, this is, yeah, glass itself. So, say it's missing, broken, where it's not usable, it's not providing the weather protection, that's where 16, it's actually 1612, so it's not on this one, it's on a different code section.
Oh, it's
1612,
exterior, yeah.
letter A for weather protection. Every building has to be able to protect the inside of it.
Okay, 'cause that was.
This is just this is just a fraction.
But the window's broken all the way through, so how can you?
Yeah, no, this is just a
Yeah,
fraction.
It's more exterior, we have a section for exterior types of violations that more address like the roof or the outdoor, the coating, the paint.
So you do accept the
Yeah.
window being broken?
Yeah, yeah, and this, I just was focusing on specifically on the interior.
And-
He
and-
told me it was a civil matter.
No, so they can use a board, a plywood board for temporary,
Yeah, he did
Fixed.
a temporary,
for,
no, it was a piece of paper.
that doesn't provide weather protection,
And
sorry.
he put a piece, it's plastic, but it had sticky on both sides, so when you put it up there, but it's broken all the way through, so all you gotta do is put your hand through the paper.
Is this someone's you know? Is this someone you knows or your place?
It's not mine.
It's not your,
No, it has to be, I mean, paper's not
But
gonna
he came
provide.
out to-
would you later on be able to meet with me to provide me the address and maybe we can work together to get that window pane solved? Okay. Just don't forget, please.
So could I have
I
clarity?
just, sorry, real quick, want to announce that we're at 5 minutes till the end of the meeting, and it'll take 1 to 2 more questions depending on the length. and then we can see if anybody, it seems like Robert's gonna stay a little bit after to have some conversations, but just doing a 5-minute warning for everybody.
Also, just to add to that too, Marlene and I are your liaisons for Ward 3, and we'll have our, if you don't already know us, we'll give you our business cards, and this is not the end of this conversation. If you have specific issues that don't get fully answered here, please work with us. We'll put you in touch with them or whoever we can to get things addressed.
I'm sorry. Yeah, good.
Is there a resource where we can look up what buildings in our neighborhood have been condemned?
Yes, that website that has been provided to you, that shows, where did it go? Follow code enforcement case history. So you type in that into your search engine, type in any address inside the city of Tucson limits, and it's gonna give you all the history. So it doesn't even have to be your place, it's public access. You can see everything on there, all case notes, all city involvements, any permits that have been applied for, that's all on there.
The building owners, the property
Property.
owners too?
No, it's limited information on that, it's just Pima County Assessor's webpage.
Yeah,
will give you that.
it'll have a link to the Pima County Assessor, and if you go there, it'll give you the property ownership.
I just want some clarity on what you said code enforcement does. That we call you for a complaint, you respond to that complaint. Before you respond to that complaint, you call the property management company and give them the notice so that they can fix the repair. And then you come out and you do the repair, and you do your inspection, and then there's a time period that the landlord has to respond.
Correct.
And then you follow that up to make, you have to have that response in order to close the case.
Right.
If you don't get response from him, then you come out again?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, or if not, you get a call from us saying, hey, Mr. So-and-so, did you get your complaints addressed? If they say yes, we got to take care of. Is it okay for us to close the case, or how do you feel? You want us to keep it open for 5 more days to make sure the AC doesn't go down? Yeah, let's do that. Or they say, you know what, even before they get fixed, well, they already had a contractor A, B, and C came out here, they're going to fix it, I'm happy with it, can we just close the case? Because, again, they want to keep it minimal so they don't get evicted. They don't lose their contract being there. They don't want to create more waves than they already have. They got their problem fixed, and most of the time they call us and they tell us beforehand, can you close the case out? It's already being solved. I'm going to say my gut instinct, 70% of the time it gets fixed. The other 30% could be that the landlord was a little bit more compelling and say, hey, close this case and we'll deal with it later. You just never know. But once my right of entry is gone, I can't do anymore. I can't force my way into someone's house.
I will say the majority of these types of cases do get resolved. So it's very, I mean, I was an inspector as well, and I just did not take very many to court because they do get resolved. So it's important to call us.
Can we just do one more question?
Oh, I was just going to add, Neighborhood Support Network has sorted by neighborhoods all the code enforcement issues in the neighborhood. So you don't need to know the address for that. You can just bring up your own neighborhood and then you can click on each one. I wondered about Section 8 housing. I know there's some inspections necessary for that. Does code do that by itself, or do you get Section 8?
Yeah, it's a separate agency. It is also with the city, with Housing and Community Development. They do have their own inspectors and own requirements about when they need to conduct a Section 8 inspection. I unfortunately don't know when that is, but I don't know if Robert does.
I don't have any idea.
Yeah.
One more quick question. What's the city's position on if, as a landlord, and you have a tenant who's been a long-time tenant, and they have a difficult time moving someplace else, the interior of the home, as far as removing trash and taking care of their pets and allowing pets to defecate inside, does a landlord ever utilize the
Yes.
code enforcement as a way to say, hey, you know, this is an unsafe situation.
Can you respond to that as far as the examples?
Yes, that gets really tricky because of the right of entry. The Fourth Amendment, it protects the occupant from government just going into their house.
Well, can't the landlord, with giving notice to the tenant, I think it's 48 hours, can't the landlord?
So there's different ways of going about it. So if there's someone's health and well safety is in
Yeah.
jeopardy, such as this,
Yes.
you normally call first responders out. First responders assess, make sure the person is okay, and depending on the situation, they involve us with different type of photos where we then get a warrant to enter the building to do a better inspection. If we do find that the house is unfit to occupy, we take action immediately and we get that property secured because we can't allow someone to
Get
live.
that property, what was the word you said?
Unfit to occupy? Condemned?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And we'll
So that in that situation, say the landlord instigated or caused. the-
property managers as well to apartment complexes, they utilize this a lot
And
too.
then so the tenant's not caring for the tenants, then can you speak about anything, have there been any examples of that?
Well, we could do, if, like in that scenario, a landlord could call in their tenant and say we got access and they had accumulation of refuse. We're still gonna ask the owner to take care of it, in that way. We might have to condemn the unit, but.
So dog feces in the
Right.
hall.
I mean, we can ask the tenant to do it too, but ultimately, legally, it's gonna fall back to the property ownership.
So most of the time when the owner asks for help on our behalf is because they're trying to do everything they can, eviction's too slow, and they just need some help to get that interior clean up, to
It's
preserve.
moving.
Yeah, to get things moving. But keep in mind, if we condemn a unit, it doesn't mean that they're evicted. They still have the right to their property, their belongings inside, but only during certain time frames. It's not just to go in there at nighttime to hang out, have a sandwich, and take a nap. It's not for that. There is restrictions with that. But
When condemning a unit, probably.
You guys, we should probably cut it there. We're a little bit over time. I want to say so much thank you to y'all, Robert, Laurie, for showing up here, for sharing their knowledge. And like I said, please don't hesitate. Marlene and I are here. If you have further questions beyond this gets you thinking, and if something comes up to you next week, reach out. We've got business cards we can give you.
Yeah, we got business.
We've got business cards as well. Thank you so much, everybody who participated. If you didn't get a chance to sign in, please do that at the front. And there's still pizza outside and some drinks. Thank you so much.
I think
Wow, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.